Back in my televisual days, I started producing my very first program, which was called Kits and Cruising. Now, the premise was this. My boss wasn't really a fan of the idea of doing any kind of kit car series, and he very much doubted there was enough people out there who would watch one. He thought the same about custom cars. So what I thought of doing to sell the idea to the bosses was to combine the two together, because both had an element of self-build about them, and it would give me twice the potential market, twice the potential audience, twice the potential number of cars. I hoped that I would learn more about the custom side, because I will be the first to say that I, even now, am not what I would describe as an expert in the custom car world. So when you hear kit car people talk about custom cars, they think of custom cars and hot rods as the same thing. And custom cars and hot rods are the same thing, and basically that is it. And it isn't. What I discovered was a rich tapestry of different genres, some of them dating back to the 1940s and some of them far more recent. And to get to the bottom of them is very complicated, because it depends who you're talking to as to what are the most important aspects. And how does that apply to the video today? Well, you see, there is custom with a C. There is custom with a K. And they are two completely different things. There are T-buckets, there are rat rods, there are hot rods, there are tot rods, and that is just a few of the different genres within the custom car world. I did get some help from some people within that community who were kind enough to educate me a bit, so that we didn't look like complete idiots when we did the channel, the series. But all the same, when you hear kit car people, or even people in general, they are as ignorant about the custom car world as people from outside the kit car industry are about the kit car industry. The reason why I'm bringing this up is that sometimes you get crossover where the custom car world meets the kit car world. And these videos this week and next week are about two of the greatest exponents of that crossover. Now, bear in mind that within the custom car world, there are many different genres, as I said. In some, you have to have the correct period-specific suspension setup, or your car isn't correct. Some, they don't mind you having mudguards, but most hate having mudguards. There are people who turn their backs on anyone who uses a GRP tub. Others don't mind a GRP tub, and they then customize it from there. But what the custom car world really specializes in is the individual. Something off the shelf that becomes an off-the-shelf hot rod or custom car isn't correct, because nobody in that world wants to be like the next guy. They want it to always be different. Whereas the kit car world strives to have everything so that it's as simple as possible to assemble. Every nut and bolt is thought about. Every bracket is thought about. That is the trajectory that the kit car industry has striven for since about the late 80s, early 90s. And there has been a gradual progression in quality within the kit car industry. Now, that's not to say there isn't quality in the custom car world. It's quite the opposite. There are some absolutely astounding paint jobs. There's astounding panel work, coach building. It is a world of pure skill, and they are very proud of what they do, quite rightly. So, how does this crossover occur? Well, Geof Jago, for example, built his reputation and his experience and a crew of dedicated artisans around his hot rod world. And he would sell bodies and chassis to people who would then modify them and customize them to create their own custom cars, hot rods or whatever. Steve Hole will fill you in on the story of the early Geof Jago products.
Straight into it this time, because I've been nagged for making me voiceovers too long, so let's get straight on with this one. I'm delighted that to be able to commemorate the 65th anniversary of a real industry great in Geof Jago. 1960 he produced his first special, so 2025 when I'm recording this marks a marvellous 65 years. So and Geof, he's now 89, he's not too well, but he's still got his man cave at the bottom of his bungalow in near Chichester, and yeah, we send our regards to a great guy. Anyway, I'm going to break this one up into two parts, because his hot rod career is distinct from his Kitcar career, and he's equally well known for both of them. But they did kind of run into each other, but they are distinct really from each other. So I think it only right and respectful to do them in two parts. So this is part one. Geof Jago part one covers the period from the early 50s really up until the early 70s, which more or less covers his hot rod and stock cars and specials building career, and it's quite a story in its own right. So I think it's only right that one gets its own air to breathe. So let's start at the beginning, as we always say. Geof was born in Purbrook in Hampshire. His parents moved to Portchester, also in Hampshire, when he was 3, and that's kind of where he's known for. His origins are really in Portchester. His early career was there. I think he was redesigning pedal cars and that from age 3 and 4. But he wasn't very good. He's the first to admit, I think, that he wasn't very good academically. He didn't like school, didn't get on really well. He left when he was 15. He got his first job at Portsmouth Dockyard as an apprentice torpedo fitter, which is quite a job, although he didn't like it, because, as he once said, he preferred making things, not destroying them. But I don't think he really liked it. But I think he also said that it did teach him how to use various tools and an understanding of workshop life, really. But his dad came to the rescue and got him a job at a friend's garage in Portchester called Hayter's Garage, Hayter apostrophe S, garage in Portchester, and he learnt the ropes of the motor trade there. And his love of cars really shone through, because it was cars that he was really interested in. He even did a couple of years, I think Hayter's opened a satellite body shop stroke panel shop down the road a couple of miles, and I think he did some work there. And it's also where he started doing customising in his in his free time. I think his dad had a Ford Consul, which was fairly new at the time, I remember he said. And by the way, Geof's celebrating his 89th birthday in I think he's nearly 90, bless him. Born in October 1936. And anyway, so he stayed at, I think he stayed at Hayter's Garage, started there at 16. I think he was there for 10 years. But he, as I said, he started with his dad's Ford Consul, and I think he described it as gently customising it. He semi-customised it. It was a Mark 1 Consul, and he sprayed the wheels cherry red, chrome trim rings, try saying that quickly, 4-bar spinners in the hubcaps, all very good stuff, and white wall tyres, He then added the accessories that were a limited amount of accessories that were around in those days. Swivelling screen pillar lamps, cool, I remember them. Chrome side strips for the car, mud flaps with reflectors. I'm bringing back some memories now to, shall we say, our older listeners. Chrome headlight rings, dummy Buick portholes. Who remembers them? They're brilliant. But he made dummy ones and bolted and stuck them to the side. Chrome whip aerials, pair of them. And for good measure, he fitted a Roman Mays exhaust manifold, and he ported and polished the cylinder head. Now, his dad was really pleased, and he had faith in Geof when Geof asked him if he could fully customise it, which is what he did. And he added tail fins to it, Vauxhall Cresta, oval rear lights, which were the bad boys of the day. And anyway, that's what really got him into stuff. He really got into the hot rod scene, or the taste for the hot rod scene, when I think a friend gave him a copy of Hot Rod magazine in the mid-50s. Nothing of the sort existed in the UK, and Geof fancied making building his first, shall we say, special hot rod special. But he kind of it's called Jago 1, and there is a photo of it here that Neil will put up. And it really was the first hot rod in the UK, albeit using British sourced parts. Although Geof once told me that I remember Carol and I were sitting in his lounge in Chichester, and he told us that he used to see the adverts in Hot Rod and Rod and Custom, I suppose, other magazines of the day, and he used to look at the adverts, and he'd cut the adverts out, and he'd send off his couple of pound notes, whatever it was he wanted to buy, to an address unknown in the US, and he'd wait several weeks and hope that the parts that he'd ordered would turn up. And he said invariably they did. He said he had a few pound notes go missing, but most of the time, and we found it quite enthralling, really. He put his faith in the postal service and to a company he didn't know, 3,000 miles away, and his Mooney's hubcaps had turned up, all sorts of things that we didn't hitherto have in the UK. He was certainly one of the pioneers of speed parts. And indeed, Geof Jago is the reason that Metal Flake paint came to the UK, because he was the first importer, and he sold thousands of litres of it, or gallons of it, or whatever, as it were, in those days. And that's kind of how he got starting. He left Haters in, I think it was 1960, when he started out in a business on his own in West Street in Porchester, just carrying out bread and butter repairs to earn a living. Although his spare time he was still poring over those American hot rod magazines. I think 1964 he'd really built up a good system of importing the stuff from America. Importing is probably the wrong word. As I said, he just used to put his money in an envelope and send off a coupon from the magazines and hope stuff would arrive. And it was 64 when that first hot rod was built, Jago 1. He exhibited it at the first customs car show in Britain, which took place in the underground car park in London's swanky Park Lane. Possibly I think it might have been the Hilton, but anyway, one of the swanky hotels in Park Lane in London's West End. And he won first prize there for that. And it really inspired him and encouraged him, and just sort of turbocharged his enthusiasm, really. And it wasn't long before people were beating a path to Geof's little operation in Hampshire, wanting his speed parts and even replicas of Jago 1. And Geof was happy to oblige, really. And that's what really got him going. I think he then started doing some stock car racing. As he said, he wasn't very good at it. He won a couple of races, but really he was building and repairing stock cars for people. And that's kind of what sort of floated his boat, shall we say. I think he was short ovaling a 1937 Ford V8 Woody, which he didn't realise at the time was mega rare, and probably kicked himself thereafter, because I think after about 6 months or so he dumped the wooden back end, grafted on a Humber Super Snipe rear body section with full console doors for good measure. And certainly 1965, I think he was shipping body kits. He got into to body kits really, and we should talk about Big Moose because that was his famous recovery truck, I think he called it. There's a photo of Big Moose going to pop up by magic on your screen. 65, he began shipping the body kits, as I said, and production Model Ts, I think, were the order of the day to start with. More suited to the UK market with suspension parts and 4-speed gearbox from the likes of a Triumph Herald, engines from Zephyr 6 and stuff, and such like other Zephyrs. And he even created. Geof was always very clever with a welding torch, very good welder and good engineer. And so he created a bell housing stroke adapter plate to make the Herald gearbox to the Zephyr 6 engine. Interesting point about Geof's first Model T was that the rear of the cab was a Singer 9 roof turned upside down. Take a look at one of them and look at one of his Model Ts and you'll kind of make it out. Driving Model T rods on the Queen's Highway in the early 60s certainly raised eyebrows. And one has to remember that back then UK motoring tastes were pretty sober. And although the days of post-war austerity hung around for a long time, by the 60s they'd all but gone really. But motoring manufacturers are still pretty conservative with their designs, albeit the standards were raised when the Mini and the Frog Eye Sprite came along in '59. Anyway, Geof, I always remember Geof telling me the story of his first ever drive in Jago 1 down the A27 in Hampshire. A 12-mile journey, I think. It resulted, I think he got pulled over by the police no fewer than 6 times over 12 miles. He said that most of the policemen that stopped him just wanted to have a look at his outrageous looking vehicle because they'd never seen anything like it before really. I think Geof was 23 at the time, and he'd deliver, and I think he did this for many years actually. He delivered each kit himself free of charge to anywhere in mainland UK, regardless of distance. It was absolutely free, and he saw that as a gesture of goodwill and of good service. I think one of his first deliveries was to the northern part of, very north of Scotland. Kit sales took off pretty quickly. Bodies cost 30 quid, I think. He was just churning them out really, which meant that unlike some of his contemporaries, such as Mickey Bray and Brian Godbow, who I guess had been inspired by Geof themselves, he didn't really have time to do kind of scratch-built rods, which I think in hindsight, I think he might have regretted a little bit, but I think he wasn't too upset by the sheer volume of the kits that he was building. Think of a UK hot rodder, and they were probably 99% of them were all inspired by Geof. That's how important he was he is to the scene, really. The influence is far and wide, and I think words like legend are overused and pioneer are overused, but Geof was a real pioneer. As I said just a little while ago, he sent off his coupon out of Hot Rod magazine after one of his mega reading sessions when the mag arrived, and he sent off a coupon to the Metal Flake Corporation of Salem, New Hampshire. Is it Salem or Salem? Anyway, ultimately resulted in Metal Flake landing in the UK. I do believe Geof told me that they created some exclusive colours just for him and for the UK market. He had a hunch that the Trick Metal Effect spray gun clogger, let's be honest, would look great on his rods, and he was right, really. Most of the a large percentage of beach buggies that were built during the beach buggy boom in the early 70s in the UK certainly featured Metal Flake bought from Geof. To be honest, I'd realised that Geof had sold a lot of Model T kits, but I'd no idea. I mean, he reckons he'd sold 900, which I truly believe. And the kind of, but they're big numbers. But his intention was to produce something that looked dramatic and would match the American rods in style, although he made his car lower and longer. He put an emphasis on handling and comfort, which some of the US rods weren't really known for. He wanted sort of long bulkheads and pendulum style pedals on his cars, really. His second Jago rod was a Model B, which was suggested by customers, really. It was public demand that created that. And he offered pickup, saloon and coupe body styles, and he sold about 500 of them. Then we come, we probably backstep a little bit to Big Moose. He's always been very proud of that car. It was a 57 in origin. It was a 57 Chevrolet fire truck, and was really a Jago work of art. I think it proved Big Moose and models like that, the few that he did that were standalone highlight rods, that he could build a good proper rod. It was 1969 when Geof met a guy called Richard Park, a really nice bloke. I think he passed away in 2017 from memory. And Geof was running, I think he was calling himself Geof Jago Speed and Custom Shop. I'll come back to that. I'll get the old brain cells going. And in fact, I'll just refer to my notes for that. But Richard Park is another pioneer. No two ways about that. A really nice guy. Another one that really sort of preferred to be out of the limelight, really, I suppose. Much preferring to let his work do the talking, really, for him. And there's a lot like that around in the automotive industry. But Geof Jago Speed and Custom Body Shop, I've just found the notes for it, and I think it was created by a friend of Geoff's in 1969. There's a famous, and in fact Neil will put it up here, it's like a blackboard or a piece of metal. No, it's a piece of metal painted black with handwritten script on it, and it describes Geof Jago Speed and Custom Body Shop. And they did metal flake, hot rod cars, kit parts, and something. Oh, and engine swaps. I think it's hard to decipher. But and he was also because Richard had really got into importing American parts, and he I think Geof he got Geof or had spoken to Geof. They became friends. And Geof was stocking some of Richard's imported parts in his showroom, which worked well for Richard because Geof had a ready-made audience of people that would beat a path to his door. So that worked well. And I think it was Geof who his company was called Custom City. And I think it was Richard who suggested to Geof that why don't they create work together? So they did. And they created an amalgamated company called Rodding Scene, and that was in 1969. That's when they moved to what was an old cement works in Quarry Lane, famous Kitcar site. If you know Chichester at all, well, I know it for traffic these days. One of the roundabouts on Chichester, it's sort of located there, and for years there was a Jago Jeep Sandero body on one of the porter cabin roofs, and it disappeared. It went when they built a footpath. A footbridge thing over the dual carriageway. Very busy road there, and everyone I speak to that knows the area doesn't know kit cars, but knew Jago. They knew of them for that body. It was on top of that porter cabin, and it went. And then for years after that, people said, "Oh, the Jeep body's gone." I went past there. I'm recording this in 2025. I went past there the other day. And it's now Jago. Stuart Jago now owns that site, or that building anyway. And he's a gifted painter, but we'll talk about Stuart shortly. But he has put that body back. You got to look for it, but you can't. But the body is back on top of a porter cabin, so I was really pleased to see that. If I could have taken a photo of it, for that road is tricky. So there we are. So that's kind of how Rodding Scene came together. I think they run it separately, but there was elements of the business that they ran together, if that makes any sense whatsoever. and it was a really busy operation. There were some real stars there working for Rodding Scene. There was Geof, Richard Park. There was a guy called Bootlace. There was, of course, Chris Brown, or Pop Brown as he's better known, who was later one third of Unique Autocraft and the UK's second commercially available Cobra replica. A guy called Pete Sturman, a chap I know quite well, who went on his own with a company called Mako Fibreglass. That's Mako. A man that we've featured a lot in TKC Mag over the years. A really nice guy called Michael, nicknamed Fred, Rutherford, with another ex-Jago employee or Rodding Scene employee called Pete the Beard Benson. And together those two founded Mako Fibreglass, and one of the best fiberglass manufacturers of the sort of 70s and 80s, responsible for most, apart from Dutton really, I think most of the Sussex scene's kit car requirements were produced by Mako. Incredible amount of high-end motorsport bodies. They were doing stuff for Brabham, they were doing stuff for the Lec F1 team, the late David Purley's company, or part of the company. All manner that Michael and Pete were doing. And never forget, Michael's name is not Rutherford as you automatically spell it. He's the Scottish way with the double O, Rutherford, but pronounced Rutherford. Not a lot of people know that, as someone said. But it was I think the kit rods came about because people said they liked the rods and they liked stuff that Geof was doing and could do for them and sell them, but they perhaps weren't always able to produce. They wanted something they could finish off, basically, and that's where the came about. He also did a sedan kit, he did a panel van, truck cab, and he's also building chassis for Ford Pops, for builders of full customised Ford Pops. And there you go, really, and that's kind of what they were doing there. Let's have a quick chat about Richard Park. Now, Richard Park goes under the radar, criminally under the radar. Really nice guy. He departed, I think they paid £9,000 for the whole site at Quarry Lane, which is amazing. And it's probably worth, well, I wouldn't like to guess, but I think after 5 years, Richard had become a bit fed up with the day-to-day work of the business, shall we say. Later, he took over the Baja beach buggy for a short time. And I think he sold, I think his half of the Quarry Lane site cost him $4,500, and I think he sold it, I think Geof said in 1974 sometime, for $65,000, which was a good return, really. He went off to do all sorts of things. He was born in Sri Lanka, which I didn't know until fairly recently, and he would import motorcycle parts and stuff such like from his homeland, really. And he set up sort of a automobilia, motorsport items, and traded from like a warehouse type, antique shop type affair, specialising in automobilia in the Chichester area. I remember seeing him once at the Goodwood Festival Speed with a stand there selling lovely bits and bobs. Had a nice little chat with him there. But then, sadly, he passed away in, I think it was 2017. But a good guy that shouldn't be forgotten in his place, along with Geof, really. He really belongs in this part of Geof's story, as being one of those real pioneers of our industry. Jago also developed, in the 80s, they were supplying chassis kits to a real cross-section of the kit car industry. Christopher Neal Lotus were having them build their chassis frames for their lovely CN Sprint. They were real rivals, proper rivals for Spider Sport or Spider Engineering, who were the other company producing half the industry chassis. But back in the day, that started back in the 70s, and Geoff got a gig in 1972 with Bob Jankel at Panther Cars, who I think initially on that monster Jaguar V12 based J72. So he built chassis for that, a couple of other vehicles, including the DeVille. I think Bob wanted Geoff to fit, he underpin some of the cars with his Model B chassis, but Geoff said that wouldn't really work. So he ended up creating a bespoke chassis for Bob's cars, so the ones that he was asked to do. I think they did some work for a company, this is in the 70s, on radio-controlled drones, or drogues, target drogues, 10-foot wingspan. So Geoff was building some metal parts for that. Going back to Stuart Jago, absolute gifted painter. Not surprising, really, given who his dad was and the skill of his dad. He worked at Jago for many years. He'd been a national level motocross rider, and he was doing some testing, I remember, I saw the name Stuart Jago and I thought, that can't be, can it? And I saw him one day and I asked him, and it was. So he was doing some features on motorcycles for several motorcycle magazines. He started S. Jago Designs in a premises that Geoff owned, a unit just behind the main Jago factory. We'll come to the Jago Developments factory in part 2. And he tackled all sorts of jobs, from general bread and butter spraying to GRP repairs, really. Had stuff on the TV. I remember a Discovery TV programme, I think he had something on there. And now he's in the original Jago unit. He's moved, you'll see as you go past there, it's still Jago, but it's S. Jago Designs. Vehicle body repair and custom paint, which I think is great and only right. I think that kind of brings us to the end of part 1. There's some beautiful period photos that Neil's put up here, I found in the archive. And I think that works. Let's just talk about how the Jago Jeep stroke Sandero came along. Some of his customers have been inquiring about a more rugged off-road style vehicle, and it just so happened, and Geoff thought that was a good idea, and it just so happened that someone he knew had access to a Willys Jeep body, which was stuck in a blackberry bush, and the guy said to Geoff, if you can get it out, you can have it. And it was perfect. It fitted the bill perfectly for what Geoff wanted. The subsequent model launched in 1971. It was based on a Ford Anglia 105E and called the Jeep. But anyway, let's keep our powder dry for the Jeep side of things, and the Kitcar enthusiasts who know Jago for building Jeeps and Sanderos. We'll come to that shortly. So I hope you enjoyed part 1. I hope it's a fitting tribute to, or just a snapshot really, of Geoff's early career. Massive respect for Geoff and a big admirer of his work. I mean, who wouldn't be? And I followed, I'm really fascinated by the early 60s UK kitcar scene, hot rod scene in the UK. Nick Butler and Great Christopher and the like, and of course the Opus HRF, and David Bowler was doing stuff as well. There's a video that we need to do.
So that's the story of Geof Jago. Geof Jago was producing kits that allowed people to go and buy a body shell. They could buy a chassis to go with it. They could buy all the components they wanted from one place to build a custom car. They could customize it, they could change it, they could do their own thing with it, and of course you could buy the paint. The chassis work was immaculate. So we've built one picture of the custom car world with Geof Jago. The other side of the custom car world is strictly one-off. It is strictly original, strictly out of this world, mind-blowing wow factor. This is the world of Ray Christopher.
This time, I've been toying with doing this episode for quite a while. It's going to be a longer one than normal, mainly because as I said, I was toying between making it into a 2 or 3 parter even, but I thought, no, we'll bite the bullet, keep it concise as we can, keep it all together. The subject is a guy called Ray Christopher, a man who I've known for many years. Haven't seen him for a long time, but I one of the first people I met when I got into the industry in the mid 80s. Incredibly talented guy and an interesting guy, which is one of the reasons I'm very excited really to bring this episode to you. Really, born in 1940, Ray grew up in the Dorset area. And I think his inspiration really came from some Ford C cabs that he saw as a young kid, and also some grainy. I remember him telling me some grainy film clips of some early Grand Prix racing that inspired him as he grew up in sort of teenage years. He studied heating engineering actually at college, and he built his first car in 1959, aged 19. That was called Cookie Tea. And it was inspired by an American TV program, 77 Sunset Strip for the record. And that's kind of how he cut his teeth, really. He would later go on to meet some famous car builders of that time in the States, Norm Kurosky, George Barris, Dale Starbird, people that he always tipped his hat to. As a nice little aside, and not a lot of people know, well, probably in the last 25 years they do, because I've been telling and writing it enough. Lovely little aside, Ray had a lovely little sideline career as a professional wrestler. He started that in 1960, and he fought under various stage names. I remember him telling me. Anyone that watched World of Sport on a Saturday afternoon probably he saw Ray without even knowing it. He had several stage names. He told me Alan Mckay, Tony Corbett, and the best of all, he took his turn. I think a few people did this one. He took his turn as the Mummy, and he'd later be. I think he was Southern Area welterweight champion. And his specialist move, again, this is hilarious, but absolutely true. His specialist move was called the Nagasaki Chufflock. And apparently he told me he was the world's only exponent, but there we go. The Mummy thing was very funny. He used to get carried into the ring in a coffin by 4 pallbearers, house lights dimmed. Once the coffin was in the ring, it sat there with a spotlight on it, and then all of a sudden, bandage-clad Ray would clamber out looking for a fight. His first fight was against, again, for aficionados and for being correctness, his first fight was against a guy called Lindy Calder. And he was allowed to win, he told me, and he got 20 quid for his efforts, which back in 1960, nice evening's work, that. Sadly, his wrestling career meant he had no real time to devote to cars. And until that is, he read about Opus HRF in one of the early issues of Hot Car magazine. And this kind of inspired him sufficiently to make him travel to Warminster, which is where Neville, Trickett and Jeff Thomas were based, making these things. And he bought one, built it. He then, nothing to do with his later career making GT40s. He modified a GT. He built his own GT40 from scratch, and he modified a Jaguar E-Type bonnet to fit on it, which is, I've not seen a photo of that. And then, of course, he did what lots of people did in the early 70s, certainly people that wanted to get into hot rods and custom cars, was he built a Jago, a T-bucket. And then that led to his own company, a company called Ray's Rods. And by this time, of course, he was also nicknamed the Rodfather. Well earned that, actually. So he did I think he did several rods. He did a 1923 C cab. Triumph suspension, I think, Ford Zephyr rear axle. And he took that first car that he exhibited as raised rods, he took it to the Crystal Palace Custom Car Show in 1973. And he said that if he received more than 2 orders, he would actually give up his wrestling career and build replicas of his C cab. And he took 4 orders, so Raised Rods was born, off and running. Other times he called himself Dorset Rodding Centre, I believe. And given, I guess he must have inspired people in that area, because he was at the time Dorset's first hot rod business. But that area has bred so many people from involved in the custom car hot rod business. Andy Saunders, for a start. The great Andy Saunders, I should say. So, and not the only one. Chris Boyle, of course, the Wizard of Rods. There's another. He is a Hall of Famer, I believe, in the UK in custom car world. Anyway, he took it. He started taking it seriously, and he got himself his first sort of proper premises, which he based himself in a disused grocer's shop. And apparently, this is all from stuff he told me. He kind of acquired or inherited the previous guy had obviously gone skint, I think, from the shop, and in a fit of pique, he peeled all the label. He left all his stock behind, his tin goods, and just peeled the labels off. So Ray said there was shelves of tinned unknown what. So what he'd do when he sold parts, because he was supplying hot rod parts at that time. When a customer came in to buy whatever, he'd give them a free tin of who knew what. It was a real mystery tour, really. So he said people ended up with dog food, baked beans, steak pie filling, God knows what. But this is the time. This was a real he was really inspired at this time, and this is where he really made his mark on the British rod scene. He produced a string of one-off incredible creations, some of which we've put the photos here to accompany this audio. There was a world famous, UK famous, European wide famous rods called, there was Beer Wagon, the LA Fire Department, Paddy Wagon, Heavy Breathing, and Moonshine Madness. He also got a commission from the Daily Mirror to supply them with a competition prize. And he tells a story that a certain Robert Maxwell came to pay for it, which was quite funny. Anyway, by 1976, as a sideline, as well as doing the one-off stuff, he was also doing the C-Cab kits. And he'd done about 60 by 1976, but he was finding it hard to keep it all together, really, because of the orders that were coming in and his fame spreading. So he sold that operation to a guy called Tom Pawley of ex-EXE Marine, based down in Newton Abbot, beg your pardon. He was a marine glass fibre specialist. But again, within a year, Pawley's firm, I believe, was struggling, and that company evolved into Term Trend, to carry on marking them. And then in turn, in 1976, he merged with a Topsham-based company called Devon Moulding Company, who moved to Oakhampton in 1979 before they just brought the shutters down for the last time and who knows what. But anyway, Ray was looking for something else to do, still obviously very interested in his rods, but he didn't want the day-to-day kit supply stuff at that time. So he started another interesting project, and it was a self-build housing kit house project called, I think he called it Paul Self-Build Housing Association. And basically he assembled a group of 11 house builders who basically all got together and guaranteed to devote 35 hours a week to build 11 new houses in the area. Real inspired stuff for the time. But as I said earlier, in his spare time, he couldn't leave the cars alone. So he was building some interesting, and this is again some really interesting stuff. He built some cars for TV series. He did. There was a car, I don't know what it was, but it was for the Duchess of Duke Street, which was on in the 70s. He did a car for the Blade Runner film. He even did one for Sir Paul McCartney. A car for Doctor Who, and famously for the comedian, late comedian and EastEnders star Mike Reid. And then 1977 came one of his most famous creations yet, really, Pasteurised Express, which was the V8 powered milk float. We've put a photo of that here. It was a V8 propelled milk float. By this time, though, he'd moved on again. He was working by day as a contract welder. And he got into organising. Well, first of all, we should say there was some other cars that he did as well. We've put here. There was a. Sorry to digress. There was a Plymouth 5-window. Made about 28 of those. He did a Model T, one of which was very famous. He hadn't built a Model T. 1973, he saw one. While he was at a petrol station in Poole, locally. And it was being restored in the garage that was on the site. And he bought that car and soon started offering replicas of it. £30 for the kit, I do believe. What a princely sum that was. And we put a photo of that car. There's an interesting one there. The famous one that he built of that 1908 Model T. It was a crossover. We're going to we're jumping forward briefly, but forgive me for that. Just when GTD had started, he a Bellevue show where they were exhibiting their KVA parts, basically, and just finishing off with their Euro Autos International, which we'll come to that in a minute, show organising company. He offered, there was a stand there, and he offered that car for sale. There's a photo of that as well with this audio. There's some real rare photos here, by the way, which I hope you like and enjoy looking at. Some of these have not even seen the light of day, I don't think. But one of the reasons for doing this series is because they deserve to be seen, and it's my absolute delight to be able to share them with you. But let's just move forward now. Let's just go forward. Ray then moved to Manchester. He got involved with the cars, like I think he did a thing called a Helicar. He did another notable car for a local builders merchants called Cement, which was basically a V8 powered cement mixer, and they actually used that as a promotional vehicle for many years thereafter. But so Ray, he moved to Manchester, and I think it was the pull of Bellevue, which for the northern area was the place it was the place for not only Speedway but for custom car shows and such like. There was a massive interest in that in Manchester area, and that's where he kind of gravitated to, really. He joined forces with a guy called Graham Kelsey, and also another guy called Roger Attaway. And they set up a company called, as I said earlier, Autos International. I think Kelsey and Ray had met at a show originally in Farnborough. And I think Kelsey and Attaway had already been running the Autos International business. And I think Kelsey was looking for some quality cars for the next Bellevue Manchester event, and Ray just happened to have the incredible Pasteurised Express on display. And I think he then did some TV promotional commercial work for the show, and he told me put 20,000 people on the gate as a result of that. Going back to that Model T that he had for sale at Bellevue later on in the early 80s, that car actually won him a prestigious award in America. That's why that car was so sought after, and I think people clamoured after buying that. But then one thing led to another, and I think by this time in the early 80s, 82, 83, Ken Atwell had just launched the first GT40 replica in the UK. But apart from the body, beautiful thing, but apart from the body, and of course it lit the touch paper for that GT40 replica scene that is still going now, really. But he didn't offer what Ken didn't do. I mean, famously, he said to me once, or said generally, really, to anyone that listened, if you needed a book to, something along the lines of, if you needed a book to build a GT40, you shouldn't be building a 40. Whether that was true, that I believe was totally true. But beg your pardon, Ken supplied the body shell, the chassis, but the customer was left to do a lot of stuff on his own, really. You're on your own in as much as finishing the car. And Ray and Graham Kelsey became aware of this and thought, they put two and two together and thought, well, they could supply the parts that KVA didn't supply, notably suspension kits. And indeed, they built several demonstrators, but one of them was called KVA GTD. And I do believe, I'm not sure about this one, but there was a plan. I think they approached Ken, and the plan was that they would co-produce fully built versions of the KVA under the KVA GTD name. But it came to nothing, and soon we had a situation where GTD Autos International became GTD, although they were running parallel for the first at least a year, I would suspect. They one of those photos, the photo we've put here with the Model T on the stand, you can, if you've got really good eyesight, I used a glass on it actually, a sight glass, to read it, that it says that if they were the one-stop shop, Autos International were the one-stop shop for anybody building a GT40, and they were offering that service, building it for them or supplying parts to those that were building them on a DIY basis. They also did door locks, which I don't think KVA customers got those with the kit. So anything that wasn't really supplied in the kit of a mechanical basis, I believe GTD were doing, or Autos International were doing. He was still going around building some cars, building some hot rods at this time. But in 1984, GT Developments was born. Autos International evolved into GTD. I think Attaway went his own way, and Christopher and Graham Kelsey moved down to Dorset, back to Ray's hometown of Poole. His contacts with the Ford Motor Company, thanks to the hot rod days, stood him in very good stead, because he had some good involvement from Ford, particularly from Ford of Germany, who had real input into various aspects of that first GTD, or the first GTD propers, really.
Now, I hope this has given you a taste, just a small taste, of the custom car world, because we have not scratched the surface. And if you would like to explain if you have the knowledge and you can explain all the different genres of custom car, custom with a K, custom with a C, rat rods, all of the different genres, name them, explain them in the comments. I won't be offended. I know that I don't have the knowledge. Please help out. Please help out my viewers. Leave a list below in the comments and explain the different genres, what the rules and regulations in terms of what's acceptable in each genre. You know, it would be a huge help to me, because I come strongly from the kit car side of the bracket when I made Kits and Cruising, and I did get a lot of help from the custom car world with people who did have the knowledge. So if you can help, please leave a comment below, explain for our viewers the different genres of the custom car world, help us educate people, and if you've got cars you'd like me to come and feature, do let me know, because I don't want to turn my back on you guys at all. And whilst you're here, if you've enjoyed the video this far, please give us a thumbs up. That tells people like us that there's something here that they will enjoy. And better still, hit on the bell. It costs you nothing. Hit on the drop down and click on all, and then you will be told when the next video rises. And the next video in this series is going to cover the kit car business of Geof Jago and Great Christopher, how they evolved into kit car manufacturers, and they both did exquisite quality products in completely different genres. So I'll see you next time.